Strictly limited to individuals that owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes. And if you qualify, we can guarantee that you won't be writing a big fat check to the IRS, or our services cost you nothing. The first 100 people that call today will get a free tax consultation worth $500. Stop worrying about your IRS problem. We can help you, we promise. Call the tax doctor right now. I mean right now, to learn more.
800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. That's 800-240-4587.
Why have thousands of aspiring authors teamed up with Christian Faith Publishing to publish their book? Because Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. We provide authors freedom and flexibility throughout the publishing process, professional book editing, award-winning design, and some of the highest royalty structures in the publishing industry. And as always, you will retain 100% of the rights to your book.
I was looking to find a company that I could trust, one that assisted in the editing process completely.
The most important qualities that I was looking for was a publisher who was honest and upfront, no hidden costs or fees, and owning the rights to my own work.
Christian Faith Publishing will publish, market, and sell your books in all major bookstores, online booksellers, as well as specialty Christian bookstores. Call for your free author submission kit.
800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. That's 800-978-4812.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Here's important new information from the Diabetes Solution Center for you, a family member, or a loved one suffering with diabetes. If you have lost your provider, or if you need a provider for diabetic supplies, you may qualify to receive your diabetic testing supplies now with little or no out-of-pocket cost, regardless of your age. All you need is Medicare or private insurance to be potentially eligible. Call the Diabetes Solution Center right now for details. Just takes a couple of minutes. Our friendly, knowledgeable agents will give you free, no-obligation information, handle all the insurance paperwork, and make sure your supplies are delivered directly to your door for free.
Call U.S. Medical Supply 24 hours a day. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. Call right now. 800-597-9323.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
You're listening to JoCo Community Radio.
Good afternoon, Johnson County. We hope you are enjoying the great intro music, Mission to Moscow by Benny Goodman. We are here with Mathew Lucci. He is running for the Texas 25th District in the United States House of Representatives. It's good to have him on today.
Great to be here, Jake. Appreciate you having me on.
And we're back with Mick Goins. Mick will be discussing a very heavy topic with us today.
I couldn't escape.
As well as Mr. Lucci here. He will be discussing his recent trip to the southern border and the issue of human trafficking. So Mick and I had recently gone to see the new movie Sound of Freedom, which is open in theaters here in Burleson, all over Johnson County. We encourage everybody, if you have not seen it, to go see it. They broke opening records on July 4th, beating out Indiana Jones, the fifth, and I use the word wonderful loosely. I haven't seen it. I don't really care to see it. There's more pressing things in this world than making Indiana Jones look young with artificial intelligence. We went to see the movie. It was wonderful. There are parts that made even the toughest buff guys in the room break out in tears. There are parts that made the women turn into Hulk Hogan and want to body slam the pedophiles over the table of justice. So we are here discussing a very pressing issue this week. Today is going to be our first day on a 2-day series for this on human trafficking. Today, Mathew will be with us through 2 segments. The first segment will be discussing his trip to the southern border, and the second segment, we will be discussing everything from the recent Homeland Security report to the Department of Justice, Department of State, as well as the United Nations report on human trafficking that was published as recently as last year. Some very concerning findings in those, some very interesting findings in those, one of which we'll discuss later. The human trafficking of young boys is up to almost a fifth of the total amount of people that are human trafficked now. We were saving that for Georgia this next Thursday to discuss the sexual curriculum in public schools, whether that is having an impact in the pedophiles choosing young boys over young girls and women making up over 80% of that anymore. So it's wonderful to have Mathew Lucci on. I'm going to give him the spotlight here for a few minutes to discuss his recent trip to the southern border, what impact it had on him, and the policies that he wants to put forth in the federal House of Representatives. So, Mathew, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, Jake, again, thank you very much for having me on. It's always great to be on Joco Community Radio. And congratulations, both Jake and Mick, on this new show. I'm happy to help kick it off here in its first full week.
We could not have picked a better first guest, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored. The pleasure is all mine. But there's a couple of things that I want to point out, and if you'd allow me to first touch upon the Sound of Freedom movie.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to.
And for those of you listening at home, no, this is not the sequel to Sound of Music. This is a very powerful film about child trafficking in Latin America and in the United States. And what we'll get into a little bit later, I'm sure, is how the United States is such a big consumer of both child pornography as well as children for the purposes of sexual intercourse and prostitution here in the United States. And so obviously that's something that we need to address. But also in the movie, they set up this island in the movie where they would bring kids so that some rich folks, primarily from the United States, could go down there and, I don't know how vulgar I'm allowed to be on this show, but have sex with children and force them into sexual acts.
We're not going to censor you for saying that. There are things that are bigger than black and white, things that are bigger than something that can be put on the nightly news or a piece of paper that we feel the public has to know. And one thing that, and I don't agree with the UN on anything, but one thing that their report said was public awareness is the first step in solving crises like this. And I do agree with that. The more parents, the more school teachers, the more individuals in this community that you have aware of human trafficking, that is the first step in ending this. And I want to be blatantly clear with that. We're not going to censor Mathew on any of his views or anything on here, because that might be what mainstream media does and what is popular anymore, but that is not the way that this country was founded. And if you have public servants and people who are willingly coming on here to discuss an issue that frankly needs ended, and it needs ended today, then that is not something that we need to be quiet over.
Well, I appreciate that, Jake. Really, the point that I'm trying to make there is, yes, this was a movie. It was based on real events. And whether we want to get into that or not, what you see in the movie is very similar to what was actually happening with Jeffrey Epstein. And one of the big issues that I have, in addition to children being trafficked into the Bahamas so that they could set up this island for rich people to go and have sex with children, that breaks my heart. But another thing that I think that we fail to do as a country, and what Congress in particular fails to do, is to push for the release of the Epstein client list. And I know that this is going to make me sound like a conspiracy theorist, but we do need to release the Epstein client list so that we know who the people are in power who are going to Epstein's Island, who are participating and are not only complicit in what was going on, but were actively participating. And one of the reasons that I believe that our members of Congress have not called for this is a lot of our members of Congress are on that list. A lot of our members of Congress's friends are on that list. A lot of their big donors are on that list. And they're on similar lists on similar islands around the country.
Hollywood, too.
Yes. I agree with you there, Mick. There are so many people that are not calling for the release of this because they know their name is on that list. They know their friends' names are on that list. So one of the things I'm calling for here on Joco Community Radio and continuing to call for so far as the only one in this race to call for it is the release of the Epstein client list. 1. And 2, I'm also calling for a federal bill to be passed for in any case where you have a mass human trafficking uncovered, that the list of all of those clients here in the United States be released to the general public, and every single person on that list be arrested and held on an insanely high bond until they are cleared.
And that is, you touched on a subject that's very imperative to the American public. Is we have had issues in this country's history that Congress has reacted overnight to solve. A lot of people don't know this, but there was a war during the Jefferson presidency called the Barbary Wars. And basically, people from North Africa were invading and raiding our naval vessels, taking our sailors hostage on the shores of North Africa. Congress and the president reacted overnight to send warship, flotilla after flotilla to go take out the Barbary pirates. And it's, we have extended this on to seatbelt laws, drinking and driving, and all of these things that are public safety and public concern matters. So the pressing issue here is, why has Congress not reacted overnight as they would to, per se, me driving seatbeltlessly up I-35 at 70 miles an hour, but you can have human traffickers driving 70 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour with a truckload of children, people who have not even finished their coloring book, people who have not even realized what they want to be when they grow up. And you have these kids that are put into prostitution rings, and these children are just taken advantage of. And there is no thought in my mind other than it's blatantly evil. It is not only that, but it's blasphemous to God, because you have children that are made in the image of God in purity, people that have not even learned what racism, what any of these social issues are, and you have them having sex with grown men who should be defending these kids, people who should be holding themselves accountable, raising themselves to a higher standard. And so that's, young men like Mathew. It's really great to see people running for Congress that hold these issues to their heart, not because they can make money off of them, or publicity off of them, but because they really care about taking care of our nation's children. And that is something that we are very dignified about on this show, and that we will be very dignified about and openly honest, is if anything concerns the general welfare of this nation, it should be a concern to our elected officials.
Yeah, and making sure that we hold them accountable for what they vote for, what they don't vote for, what they propose, and what they don't propose. And there's a clear blank spot in what our elected officials are proposing right now. And that's among the reasons why I decided to take my first of several trips as a candidate down to the southern border. I've been several times prior, and this time was really an educational opportunity. We went down to the lower Rio Grande Valley to survey some parts of the border wall, the border fence, to talk with locals and law enforcement about how the lower Rio Grande Valley is addressing illegal immigration, how they're addressing drug trafficking, how they're addressing human trafficking. And as someone who grew up here in Johnson County, right off of I-35, which is one of the nation's biggest arteries for human trafficking. I mean, I remember growing up and hearing on the news that that they had been catching child predators in Alvarado and in Venus and in Burleson and in Joshua, which is all great that they're being caught. But how many more are not being caught? And how many more kids are being trafficked into Johnson County or through Johnson County into Tarrant and up north into the rest of the country that came from the southern border, who just, were put into a van or a truck that drove up I-35. I'm one of the big believers that the interstate highway system is the single most crucial piece of infrastructure in global history. But it's a double-edged sword, because on the other side, yes, you can get anywhere in the country in a couple of days, but that also means that anyone else can get anywhere in this country in a couple of days, and it is very easy to lose children once they come into this country, or those who are trafficked from within the United States to pretty much anywhere else, and that makes it very difficult for law enforcement.
Would you mind telling the viewers and the listeners about your recent trip to the southern border? What did you tour? What exactly? Who did you meet with? What did you discuss? And what came out of it for you? What were the benefits of your recent trip this past weekend?
Yeah, Jake, that's a great question. We did a lot of things. We listened to some to the stories of some individuals who are survivors of human trafficking. We went down and toured the southern border. We saw several areas of border fence. We talked to a local constable down there. I met up with someone that I had originally met at a Stop Fentanyl rally in Austin, who happens to live down the Rio Grande Valley. And so he took us across the border into a small border town called Nuevo Progreso. And in this town, he told me, you're not going to find a lot of illegal immigration over here. This is not the part of the border where that is really too big of a problem anymore. And what I really wanted to touch upon when I went across the border, because it is more of a touristy area, is two things: human trafficking, number one, and number two, drug trafficking. There are a lot of primarily American citizens who will cross the border for cheaper medications, cheaper drugs, and as soon as you cross the border, they're yelling Vicodin, Percocet, Xanax.
Really?
Yeah, and there's dozens and dozens of these pharmacies, and they're just standing there on the other side of the bridge, holding these signs with all of the names of the different pills that they sell, all of the labels, and they'll try to grab you by the arm and bring you inside, and they'll try to sell you pills.
Where is this at again?
This is the southern border near Nuevo Progreso.
It's amazing, clearly, because all of this, just as the arteries of avenue and commerce in our country, every one of them is interconnected. And so what you gained out of it was not only a good look at what the border is truly like, which Kamala Harris, Mathew is what, 2-0 on visiting the southern border now. You gain a good look at the collapse and the other failure that our nation's medical industry has become. We have Americans that are going to unregulated, unlicensed, more than likely unlisted pharmacies south of the border simply because they can't pay for it here at home.
And I want to interject something there. One, in many of these places across the border, it is dangerous. It is cartel-controlled territory. That's what I was told by my friend who brought me across the border and was telling me that man over there, he's a member of the cartel, and he's coming around to collect his dues from each of these pharmacies. And he tells me he sees that all the time. That is a big danger if you get in the middle of a business owner who doesn't want to pay the cartel and the person who's out to really collect their bounty.
Yeah.
We saw earlier this year several American citizens get caught in the middle of a gunfight and unfortunately didn't make it down near Monterey. What we also see, and that's the other potential danger of this, is the LA Times, and I'm not a huge fan of the LA Times, but they published this expose earlier this year where they sent investigative journalists across the border into a bunch of these different border towns to a bunch of these different pharmacies. And they were able to get pills, for 10% of the cost of them here in the United States. So, when they came back, they tested those pills. And what they found in 11 out of 40 of the pharmacies they went to, those pills were laced with a deadly amount of fentanyl. It is truly dangerous to go across the southern border, whether that pill bottle is sealed. And that used to be the thing. Okay, don't buy individual pills.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, my friend and I, we went into the different pharmacies and we asked, okay, do you sell individual pills of Percocet? Because that's one of the opioid medications that's extremely addictive, but it has a medical purpose. One, but two, it's also one of those pills that is most frequently laced with fentanyl in Mexico. And they told us, we're not allowed to anymore. We're not allowed to anymore. And my friend told me that's because the cartel in that part of Mexico won't allow them to sell individual pills anymore. They have to push a full bottle of pills to people here coming from the U.S. Now,
And that was, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that was one thing that I highly respected you for when you were campaigning here at Bicentennial Park in Burleson, was you created a company to counter the fentanyl crisis, which is more than, I would say, more gumption than any member of Congress has. In all actuality, it takes a very small person to sit there and sign your name on one bill every other year or something, or get on the TV and say, this is a big concern. Americans should be worried about this. Well, last time I checked, we didn't pay members of Congress to sit there and tell us what the issues were. We paid them to find solutions for these because we don't have the time in our work schedules. We don't have the time in our school schedules to solve these things. So we hire somebody that is credible, somebody that is honest to go and do this. And the one thing that you did that I liked was you touched on an issue that a lot of congressmen have not touched on. And I don't know whether it's because they are making something out of this. They're getting publicity. They're getting these ratings. But you have actually started to counter the fentanyl crisis before you ever started running.
Yeah, about 3 years ago, I started a company called Wernette, and I mentioned this briefly when I was on the breakdown with Greg Cooper. Shout out to him, a wonderful host, as are y'all.
I was about to say
we're doing our best work here.
But I started a company called Wernette, and we're in the middle of developing a device that can measure how much pain medication is in a patient's system and automatically dose the correct amount so that that patient doesn't get high and they don't feel pain while they're recovering from a major surgery. And the reason why this is important is 75% of people who try fentanyl for the first time or heroin for the first time first get addicted to prescription medication that they were prescribed. These are, your hydrocodone, your Percocet, your Vicodin, things like that as soon as you cross the border into Mexico, you can buy for 1/10 of the price without a prescription. And a lot of what's available on the streets here comes from Mexico, either by direct cartel activity or by individuals who are just opportunistic and doing basically drop shipping, if you will, on these deadly medicines.
So I have a question there, and it leads into it. So if they're lacing the pills in Mexico that are coming across the border, are they lacing any pills here, or is it all coming from the southern border?
Yeah, that's a great question. It used to be where they would lace them all in Mexico and bring it across. Nowadays, it's become a lot more efficient for these cartels to just pawn it off on people in the United States to crush full pills of fentanyl and mix them in with fake oxycodone, fake hydrocodone here in the United States.
So it's within our jurisdiction, meaning we can actually do something about it if we wanted to.
Yes. If Congress wanted to act, they could.
Okay.
And if, God willing, I'm elected to Congress, we will do something about it.
Words must give way to action.
Exactly.
There was a question that I wanted to ask you, and that is, I think it's something that our viewers and listeners, everybody would love to hear. If you are elected to Congress, what would be your first priority to act against human trafficking and drug trafficking at the southern border? What can we do day one to kind of, if it's not even pass a law, what would you do your first day to make sure that it's changed?
Yeah, that's another wonderful question, Jake. There's a lot of things that I want to do to address this. One of those would be to release the client lists of all major human trafficking organizations that we know already. Like, the Department of Justice has all of this. They're waiting on Congress to tell them release this information to the public, or at the very least, release it to Congress.
I mean, we even have publicly, you can go online and find terror organizations listed by the Department of Justice. You can find,
and you can look and see where there are hotspots in the United States.
Oh yeah,
and you can even find information about the people living in the United States who are connected to terror organizations. That information should be available for human traffickers. I did also want to mention one other thing about that trip down to the southern border. We did go to the Donna detention facility, and I will say I posted a 10-minute long video summarizing that trip. It's on my website, luccifortexas.com. Go down, click the little YouTube link, and it'll take you right to the YouTube channel where everything is. But one thing that I am kicking myself that I didn't have the camera on for. My friend Demesio and I, we were coming back, and we both kind of look like tourists. Even though he was born in Mexico, but he had a fedora, the Hawaiian shirt on.
The class act.
Yeah, exactly. While we were walking back, and we were a few blocks away from the bridge to get back to the United States, a young man came up to us, couldn't have been, older than you guys. And he offered us hookers.
Jeez.
And, we were a little taken aback by that. And we said, no, thank you. No, I didn't ask that question. We told him we were not interested. And he was like, okay, I can get you one that's 18. Because he thought that was the big barrier for us. Because there's two men coming across the border who look like tourists. It looked like, we were on the town to spend some money, and it was clear we weren't there for medical tourism. So he immediately jumped to, these are a couple of guys who are here for sex tourism. And when we pushed back against it, like his thought was, the reason that they're saying no is because they want one that's at least 18.
That escalated.
Do you think
very quickly
that the crisis at our southern border is purely a national issue? Like the United States has failed to maintain absolute security at our southern border, and we know that President Joe Biden, and I might make a lot of enemies for putting my 2 cents in, but he has utterly failed at the southern border with the expiration of Title 42 and medical screenings at the southern border, with the collapse of the support from the Biden administration to our border officials. And this is not even a partisan point. This is purely common sense. We have 100,000 people, and that's nearly a tenth of what the population of Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is, of Chinese nationals with possible ties to the Chinese Communist Party that are perfectly military-age individuals moving across the southern border every other month, and they have been caught. And I don't even know if they were applicable to catch and release or not. But do you think this is an issue with the United States itself right now, or do you think that there is some sort of moral issue that we have collapsed upon at the southern border?
Yeah, I think it's both. Members of Congress have been running on the southern border for at least 50 years.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Hillary Clinton back in 2004 and 2006 was saying that the Bush administration was allowing too many illegal immigrants into the United States and that we had an open border. And then as soon as there was another administration, the sides flipped on it. They flipped back and forth every single election cycle, saying that, the other person is allowing too many people into this country. So, but they don't actually want to fix it because they want to run on it. And it is something that's appalling to me because drugs are coming into this country. We've had more fentanyl deaths this year than any year in history, and next year it's expected to get worse. There are more children in sex slavery in the world and in the United States today than there have ever been before. So on both sides, is policy and a moral failing.
It's not even a partisan issue. And there's one thing that I wanted to touch on about Sound of Freedom and the precedence of it is you had a Guardian issue in 2018 come out. They said the child sex trafficking crisis in Cartagena, Colombia. Now we saw 5 years later, the Guardian comes out and shows its true colors and says the Sound of Freedom is backed by QAnon conspiracy theorists. Well, if anybody knows, they cited the statistics as the reason that it creates paranoia to the general public. $150 billion a year industry, and 2 million kids are kidnapped every year for sex exploitation. They said that was a conspiracy. Now, in the 30 seconds we have left, I'm going to show you real quick. This is the 2021 report from the Department of Homeland Security. On page 2, Cardell T. Morant, the director of the DHS Center for Countering Human Trafficking, says human traffickers are in it for the money with an estimated annual global profit of $150 billion. They victimize 25 million people worldwide, with 80% forced labor and 20% in sex trafficking. With that, we're going to go to a commercial break. We'll stay with us. We'll be right back. We'll be discussing these reports with Mathew Lucci, candidate for House of Representatives.
Let's be honest. Wheelchairs are heavy, bulky, and ugly. If you carry a wheelchair in your car to take care of a loved one, you know how hard it is getting that clunky, old-style wheelchair in and out of your car. Introducing the Feather Chair Wheelchair. At 13 pounds, it's the world's lightest wheelchair. It folds in seconds and fits neatly in your trunk, backseat, or closet, so you can take it everywhere. And it's only available right here. Order yours today and get a free wheelchair case, a $50 value, yours free. The Feather Chair. The world's lightest wheelchair is just $4.99 with easy payments as low as $16 a month. Sorry, no Medicare or insurance accepted. So call right now to order yours.
800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. That's 800-823-5826.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
You're listening to Joco Community Radio.
Good afternoon, Johnson County. We're back. Hope you're enjoying this lovely intro by the Benny Goodman Orchestra. Joco Community Radio is proud to be the voice of Johnson County, Texas, and is live 24/7 on the TuneIn Radio Network. TuneInJoco.com is the place to find all the ways to listen and watch. The station app is also available for free on both Apple and Android devices. Simply search your store, check out our lineup and more at jococommunityradio.com. This episode and more are brought to you by Next Level Claims, making your insurance work for you. Reach out to your Texas sales rep at 844-839-4245. That's 844-839-4245. Be sure to address your items and more at thetiffy.com. We are here on this beautiful day that God has made. We will be glad and rejoice in it. We have Mathew Lucci with us, back for the second half to discuss the ending. He really wanted to emphasize a few things about his border trip, and then he's going to be joining us to go over briefly some reports, and these are available to the general public, so I'll give you exactly what to look up if you want to do your own research post-show. So, Mathew, I'm going to give it over to you to bring home your trip to the border.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. Two of the things that I want to bring up is one, that walls work. That's what we found down the Rio Grande Valley. It has more miles of border wall or border fence than anywhere else in Texas. And what we found out by talking to local law enforcement and locals who live down there is that it forces the people who are coming across illegally or trying to traffic drugs illegally into this country to go through certain choke points, makes it easier for the brave men and women of our Customs and Border Patrol to be able to do their job. The second thing that I want to talk about is that both drug trafficking and child trafficking are alive and well, and whether it means they actually come into the U.S. or whether it means it's just across the border for American tourists to go and abuse young kids. We definitely have a moral problem here in the United States that leads people to want to do that. So we definitely do have to address the demand side of it. But I do also really quick want to emphasize what happened to us as we were coming back across the border. Someone came up to us and offered us, as American tourists, offered us prostitutes, and was trying to get us to purchase the services of a prostitute. And when we pushed back and we said, no, they immediately jumped to, no, okay, we can get you one that's 18. Because they thought that Americans like us coming across the border who were not there for medical tourism, we weren't carrying any drugs back with us, we weren't carrying any prescription medications back with us. They thought these guys must be here for sex tourism. So they came up to us and they offered us children. And that just tells me this is something that's heartbreaking. It's alive and well across our border, and it's definitely something we need to be addressing.
And I think that people in this country have completely lost the sense of moralization. And that's not just our congressman, but you walk down the street, it's very hard not to see a young girl exposing more than somebody in the 50s or the 60s would. And I don't think any self-respecting country can say that they are against an issue and be normalizing this in their children. And that's what we're going to discuss, Thursday with Georgia. But with the rise of pornography, the rise of explicit language in our youth, the view that we can objectify women and men and children in this country, it is something that the parents of this country have faltered on. And I'm not here to make enemies. I'm not here to say that anybody specific or anybody in any party. I think there's people on every side of the aisle that if you look back at the sense of religious upbringing, the sense of normalizing morals and good behavior in our youth, a good work ethic, we are now instilling them with sex is okay, go out and do this. And I definitely think there's a correlation between that and the rise of child trafficking. But there's more than one place that we have to solve before this becomes a night and day difference.
It's not a political issue; it's a moral issue.
Exactly. Mathew, unless there is anything else that you wanted to cover, I'd love to go over the reports for the last 20 minutes here. I really think there's a lot of important things that there's a lot of evidence that confirms what you're saying, that associates what you're saying with not only a national issue, but an international issue. For anybody that saw the movie, I said this before we went away, The Guardian, and I don't want to say that they are now pro-trafficking, but it was very funny that they considered this a paranoia. It's almost like we have diagnosed the American public with mass hypnosis or mass schizophrenia because we want our children to be safe. There is a message from the director of Homeland Security Center for Countering Human Trafficking, Mr. Cardell T. Morant, and I had the liberty of going through this report and looking through some interesting things. He says right on the cover, and he is right under Alejandro N. Mayorkas in the Department of Homeland Security. Yeah. And he says, with an estimated annual global profit of $150 billion. Now, we were discussing this before the show, Sean. How much is that in correlation to a bank, for instance?
To give you an idea, the two largest banks are Goldman Sachs and the Rothschild Investment Banking Group. They may be on a good year move a fraction of that. And keep in mind, this is $150 billion, how much profit they're making per year, not how much they're moving or holding on to, how much it's worth overall, how much they're making per year.
And I'm quickly going to look something up.
I would also like to add, the only other industries I could think of that can move anywhere near that kind of money are the military industrial complex, big pharma, and big oil. This could quite literally be one of the biggest industries in the face of the planet right now, and it's right under our nose.
In the fiscal year of 2023, this is from usaspending.gov, the Department of Education budget was almost $195 billion. So these traffickers are making nearly, and I say nearly, it's $40 billion difference, but nearly almost the same amount as we are spending on educating our youth. And that encompasses almost 19 to 20,000 cities across the country. This nation has 20,000 cities, and we are seeing a profit margin of nearly what we're spending on education for thousands and thousands of school districts and independent districts across the state and across the country. So if that is not concerning to Congress, then I would like to see somebody who's not flying by the seat of their pants cover this issue. There is also another one that came from screening at the border. It says the U.S. Border Patrol participated in training provided by other departments. So we are working with state and local officials on this matter. But is it enough? Is my question to Mathew right now, just looking at the spending that people spend on child sex and pornography of children that are underage, by the way. Is the federal government doing enough?
Well, clearly they're not. If you look at this U.S. Department of Homeland Security report, and you look in here and you see that they are making, and I'm a small business owner, so I understand when they say profit, that is after they pay everyone, after they pay the expenses, after they pay transportation and logistics costs to get these kids. Or
so we could even be looking at somewhere upwards of $200 billion before
this could
before
be a
the
$1
gain.
trillion industry.
Yeah.
It could, but we know this is the amount that they're taking home. So clearly, if anyone is able to take home $150 billion a year under our noses, selling children into sex slavery, the federal government is definitely not doing enough.
There is another report here. If anybody wants to look at the first report, it's called the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Countering Human Trafficking Year in Review, October 2020 to September 2021 report. This next report comes from the Department of Justice, Human Trafficking Data Collection Activities 2022 by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. On page 3, they talk about prosecution and adjudication of these people with these charges of human trafficking. It says they base it on 3 different categories. Those are peonage, slavery, forced labor, and sex trafficking. Sexual exploitation and other abuses of children is the second. The third is transportation for illegal sexual activities and related crimes. We are seeing an uptick in the amount of people that are convicted of these. The number of persons investigated and prosecuted for a trafficking offense increased from fiscal year 2011 to 2020. A total of 2,198 persons were referred to it in 2020, a 62% increase from 2011. The amount of people prosecuted for human trafficking increased from 729 in the year 11 to 1,343, an 84% increase. But we are not seeing people convicted of this. So we are seeing referrals and prosecutions go up, but nobody is really getting charged for these human trafficking crimes as of the year 2020 when this report came out. So what I want to ask Mathew, and I think something that we all want to know is, after COVID, when people were going into hiding with these illicit activities, one would expect to see it go up simply because more people are at home. We can kind of see the movement of these illicit activities a little bit easier. But I think the federal government was a little bit too occupied getting their grant money from Pfizer and COVID to get people these vaccines and push a major effort for public surveillance rather than actually seeing what is wrong with our kids and the state of our youth. Do you think that the decline in defendants being convicted of this, do you think we are actually displaying justice and prolonging these things to make sure we're not charging people that aren't in on it, or we might have the wrong person? Or do you think it's simply because the federal government has taken its priority on this matter away?
Yeah, it's another great question. First, in answer to that, I want to say thank you to the wonderful law enforcement here in Johnson County who've done an amazing job Sheriff King, before he became sheriff, was involved in some of the largest sting operations on child trafficking anywhere in the state, and it happened right here in Johnson County. So he'd be another great guest to have on, or someone from his office to directly address, what Sheriff King's office needs. But what we also see is, let's say Sheriff King does his job, catches a sexual predator, refers them for prosecution. What we're seeing is a lack of convictions. And that signals to me that our federal government and this Department of Justice, which everyone knows is highly politicized, they have other
Department
priorities.
of Injustice.
Department of Injustice, they have other priorities. And I think the greatest priority that we need to have is protecting the lives of our children. Right now, the federal government is just not doing that. Whether it's what's going on in the schools with the curriculum, and I'm sure George is going to be talking about that. See, I'm helping you guys out. I'm previewing the next show for y'all.
We appreciate it.
I'm not sure I can run an ad for you guys legally, but make sure everyone to tune into the next show. They have another great guest coming up on Thursday. But whether it's that aspect of it, or whether it's the federal government just not going after child sex predators, whether it's the federal government holding on to the Epstein client list of a bunch of other people that they could be prosecuting right now, but they know that there are a lot of people on that list who are in Congress or are major donors for Congress, that they don't want to upset.
And I know that they had recently released the flight logs and everything, and there were a few presidents, a few businessmen who looked at that list. Probably some that were expunged, probably some that to this day will tell you, I didn't really go on the island. I was just traveling in the area when that charge so happened to be dropped upon me.
Isn't that what Bill Clinton said about the list and his name being on it?
Well, I will say this. One, I know for sure I'm not on it. You can basically look at my whole life, and I'm not rich. So, two, I think whether you're Republican, whether you're Democrat, whether you're Independent, Libertarian, Green Party, Alliance Party, whatever, if your name is on that list and you are a sitting member of Congress, or you're in a state house, any elected office, two things. One, you should be impeached and removed from office immediately.
Yep.
And two, you should be put in jail for a very, very long time, because there is no greater crime than the crime of doing this to innocent children.
That leads to a question I have. What if the reason convictions are going down is because they're intentionally turning a blind eye to certain individuals or certain groups or syndicates?
I think that's a very real possibility. At the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, they have a list.
Yeah.
They know people who were there, that they need to be investigating. One, two, they need to be referring for conviction, and three, they need to be prosecuting.
Because I was thinking, sorry. I was thinking that this is a $150 billion industry per year. It could very well be $1 trillion industry.
It's not poor people buying these services.
There's got to be a private equity behind this. There's organizers, there's movers, there's soldiers. Like, this is a whole operation. So there's no way that they're not turning a blind eye to someone at some point.
And in order for you to turn a blind eye to something like that, there's got to be money going into your pocket. And so what I'll say right now, and I hope you don't mind me clipping this and trying to push this out there.
No, that's all right.
I challenge every single member of Congress, including the individual I'm running up against, Roger Williams, to call for the Epstein client list to be released. We know that the members of Congress who do not call for it to be released, we know there's a reason they're not. And it speaks volumes about every single member of Congress, and every single member of this administration who is not calling for it.
And sound horrible. I do want to cover one thing that furthers Matthew's point on people on the inside being part of this. And I think it's definitely funny that in the 50s we had the morality to at least say we had a list of people who were communists and having loyalty tests to make sure that we didn't have people from our enemies running our government, which is, reasonable to say. But we now have a government that doesn't want to have any beneficent morality to it. And what I do want to further on Matthew's point about people being paid off for this is not necessarily a list of people that were paid off, but we do have a report here from the U.S. Department of State. It's called the Trafficking in Persons Report from July of 2022. I'm going to be honest, I didn't read the whole report through. We're looking at Times New Roman in like size 6 font, and it goes on for a good 8 pages. So there's a lot there. But in the section on prosecution, it has a whole paragraph on this. I'm just going to read it briefly for you. There were reports of government personnel complicit in human trafficking crimes, and the government took action to increase the ability to hold such personnel accountable. In some cases, not all, there were also reported instances of law enforcement officers sexually abusing or engaging in sexual acts with known or suspected victims of sex trafficking in the course of conducting these investigations. So not only are we not prosecuting people that are responsible for this, but a federal Department of State report says that we have law enforcement officers who are having underage sex with these people that they are supposed to be rescuing. And if that is not blasphemous enough to the sense of law and order, it says federal investigations and incidents involving federal law enforcement officers remained ongoing well into the second half of 2021. The DOJ issued a policy prohibiting undercover personnel from engaging in those acts to obtain intelligence, blah, blah, blah. It says one study noted even where law enforcement officers did not engage in those acts with victims, some of those officers thought they were allowed to do so. Advocates called for state legislation prohibiting engagement in sexual conduct with victims during law enforcement actions, which only one state in the country had in place. So, Matthew, we know that the Department of Justice, being now heavily politicized and practically is out to get anybody that has any sort of dissidence to the moral disillusion that our administration is facing. What can we do to ensure that we have the loyalty of all of our law enforcement in these matters? And I'm not saying that all of them are bad, but there are certainly a select few, just like any bad school teacher, any bad chef. You know, you get food poisoning once, probably not cut out to be a good chef. So what can our Department of Justice do to ensure that these people are not engaging in these acts that they're supposed to be preventing?
Yeah. The first thing I want to say is that the vast majority of our brave men and women in blue um, are doing an amazing job, especially here in Johnson County Sheriff's Office, the Burleson Police Department, Cleburne, place I grew up down in Venus. The vast majority of them are doing an excellent job and are really doing a great service to the community. So thank you to all of y'all. The second thing that I'll say is there's been a big cry to end qualified immunity in this country. And that's the practice where if a police officer needs to commit a crime in furtherance of an investigation, that they can't be held accountable for that. And an example of where that's a good idea is if they need to catch a perpetrator who's going down the highway at 85 miles an hour. The police obviously have to be able to break that speed limit, and not have to deal with getting prosecuted in order to go chase them down. But on the other hand, I'm someone who believes that we need to restrict qualified immunity. Having sex with a child in the name of an investigation
or rescuing them.
Yeah, in the name of rescuing them, that's completely unacceptable and horrific. I don't know how further traumatizing a child is supposed to help them. I don't know how committing one of the worst acts humans could ever do is supposed to be a good thing. And so what the Department of Justice can do is restrict qualified immunity to remove that and make it very clear to all the officers, no, you cannot, even if a superior says that it's okay, you cannot engage in any of these activities.
Let's not feed into it.
And that kind of plays into I don't know if Mick or Mathew, you guys have seen those videos of those kids that go on 20 years and then they show young boy meets police officer who rescued him from opioid overdose or something, and then it shows them 20 years on, shaking hands with the officers. If we had a video for those officers that did engage in these illicit acts in the name of justice, I would not want to see one out that says child meets officer who raped them 20 years later. That is something that if you don't want it in the public eye, then it shouldn't happen in private. That goes back to the entire issue of morality in this country. Is we have a Department of Justice that I'm not saying everybody. There is a select few of them who are doing these things, have no clear oversight into what is going on. There's some of them who are clueless in the matter, that they think the world is a playground for these actions to take place, that children do not experience trauma that comes from these things. It's a vacuum universe, but that's clearly not the case. And so if you were elected to Congress, Matthew, what would your priority be overall for the Department of Justice?
Yeah, my biggest priority would stop the politicization of the Department of Justice, and this goes both ways. It does, like I said earlier, it does not matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or anywhere in between. Justice should be uniformly served across the board. It should not matter who you are. If you are having sex with children, if you are trafficking children, you need to be prosecuted. It does not matter if we're on the same side of the aisle or the opposite side of the aisle. And I think a lot of Republicans need to get better at saying, okay, what this Democrat did was bad. What this Republican did was bad. What the Democrat did was unacceptable. What this Republican did was unacceptable. We cannot play politics with our justice system, and we definitely cannot play politics with the lives of our kids.
And I definitely do agree with you. And I want Mick to have some input here for the last few minutes. But if we are expecting justice to be served equally across the board for the citizens of this country, then that equality should apply to the federal government as well. There should be no blind justice for the political parties, for the donors, for these individuals that insist these heinous acts are good for our country. And they are very loose constitutionalists. They say, well, the public welfare clause of the Constitution gives us this. The general welfare plays into this. If you really think the general welfare clause implements or correlates to the federal government getting off the hook on things that they do wrong, then it's just as blind as saying we're not going to enforce the speed limit on one person, but we will another. We are not going to enforce seatbelt laws on one person because we are too busy enforcing it on another. So, Mick, if you want to jump in and give your 2 cents on the trafficking issue or whatever else, you're more than welcome to.
I spent some time on the southern border when I was active duty Army. You cannot have this discussion without having the immigration discussion because we have a gaping wound on our southern half of our nation. It's all coming in from there, or it's all centered from there, or at least a good majority of it. I'd also like to quote the movie and say, God's children are not for sale.
Amen.
Amen.
And we do have a good minute and 35 seconds left. So for the next minute, if we are not going to be brought out by the goons, I think we should say a prayer for our kids and our country. And I don't think that anybody here is more qualified to say that than the gentleman who is running for Congress. Mathew, if you would like to, for the next minute, we're more than open to doing that.
Yeah, I would be happy to.
And we encourage our listeners for the next 30 seconds, if you would bow your heads with us and join, because this is more than a national issue. This is something that we have to pray over our country that God will fix with our help, of course. We're committed to doing the Lord's work.
Dear God, we know that we're all your children. And we know that there's a lot of evil going on in this world. And we know that it's something that you're calling each one of us to have a hand in. So I pray for the millions of children across the globe who are put into sexual slavery or labor slavery, Lord. I pray that you would use our hands and our feet to go out and do your work, and our voices to speak for those who can't. Thank you, Lord, in your holy name. Amen.
Join us Thursday as we have lifelong educator Georgia Wright Head, and Matt Shelton, who owns a nonprofit dedicated to freeing sex slaves in North Texas. He has freed over 600 so far. Join us Thursday to hear from them. God bless and good evening.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, JOCO Community Radio.
If you're trying to quit drinking or doing too many drugs, listen to me. You don't know me and we'll never meet. I had a problem like you once. I drank and used to party a little too much till it got out of control and almost ruined my life. I realized I needed help to fix my problem before it totally destroyed me. If you've tried to fix your drinking and drug problem and you know you can't do it alone, you need to call the National Treatment Advisors. They'll immerse you into a 30-day program to replace your old habits with new habits and totally change your life. And if you have PPO private health insurance, the entire program may be covered. Fix your problem right now before it gets any worse. Get clean. Call now and learn more. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581.
Attention all business owners and creative minds. Do you need a unique and personalized touch for your products? Look no further than Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs. I'm Ron Phillips, co-owner of Romika Designs. We offer custom laser engraving services for a variety of products, including promotional items and corporate or personal gifts. With state-of-the-art equipment and a team of skilled designers, we can engrave intricate designs on virtually any material. Whether it's a special message, a company logo, or a custom design, Romika Laser Engraving will help you make your mark. And the best part, our prices are affordable and our turnaround time is quick.
I couldn't be happier with the work Romika Laser Engraving did for me. The engraving on my product was precise and exactly what I wanted.
So don't wait any longer to add a personal touch to your products. Call Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs today at 817-400-4040 or visit our website at romikadesigns.com. We look forward to helping you make your mark.
Hey travelers, do you want to save money on your next flight? Then pick up the phone and call. That's right, call, because the best prices are not online. They're with SmartFares. See, SmartFares has special deals with the airlines. When they have unsold seats, they use SmartFares to fill them. So you get airline tickets at ridiculously low prices. Our prices are too low to publish online. With the extra money you'll save, you can book another trip or treat yourself to dinner or shopping. So stop searching all of those travel sites to find the lowest price on your next flight. Let one of our SmartFares expert travel agents find ridiculously low prices for you. Call SmartFares today and get the best price on your next flight. Guaranteed. Also, save up to 50% off business and first class tickets.
855-325-1820. 855-325-1820. That's 855-325-1820.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
JOCO Community Radio. Listen live at jococommunityradio.com.
Harvest Moon, Mid-November, met that girl on the bank of the river. Style and grace, yeah, she's a lady. Drives me wild and makes me crazy. But she's my green-eyed Texas angel. Saved my heart when it was in danger. She rocks my world, and Lord, I'm thankful for my green-eyed Texas angel. 0 to 10, that girl's an 11. Here on earth, she's a piece of heaven. Side by side, yeah, we stand tall. Hand in hand with me through it all. She's my green-eyed Texas angel. Saved my heart when it was in danger. She rocks my world, and Lord, I'm thankful for my green-eyed Texas angel. Heart of gold and a smile that'll bring you to your knees. She's all I'll ever want, she's all I'll ever need. She's my green-eyed Texas angel. Saved my heart when it was in danger. She rocks my world, and Lord, I'm thankful for my green-eyed Texas angel. She's my green-eyed Texas angel.
Wanna make this whole room jealous. What it is they know we've got. Just one touch from you and I can feel that rush. Just when I thought I could never get any better, guess what? There you go again, driving me crazy again, forever and ever and out of my mind. Feel the adrenaline hitting 110 tonight. I want you to hold me like you never wanna let me go. I want you to talk to me like the first thing out of your mouth makes my heart explode. Strong on the good days, even stronger on the bad, makes the whole world stop spinning in its tracks, saying, damn, I wanna love like that.
I love the way you make me want you. I love the way you make me wanna come out early, get you home and into bed. And when that morning light comes sneaking through, open your eyes, I've been loving what your smile said.
Ooh, there you go again, driving me wild again, forever and ever and out of my mind. Feel the adrenaline hitting 110 one more time. I want you to hold me like you never wanna let me go. I want you to talk to me like the first thing out of your mouth makes my heart explode. Strong on the good days, even stronger on the bad, makes the whole world stop spinning in its tracks.
Gotta get out of this town before they let us alive. Feel lights and signs where they flash. Drive as far as we can. We ain't never looking back. 'Cause everyone we know is gonna drag us down. We might not make it out next time around. And all we got is ourselves. That's more than we can say for anyone else. Yeah, baby, we got to get out. Yeah, no one sees you the way I do. Bright and full of life, like the sun shining through. The cracks in the blinds, they hide my pain. Thinking of how they want to see our love go down in flames. 'Cause everyone we know is gonna drag us down. We might not make it out next time around.
You walk in and every head starts turning. You're a walking, talking angel, that's for sure. But in your eyes, I see there's something missing. And I know what it is you're looking for. You're long overdue for some loving. You need someone to hold you all night long. If you want romance, honey, just give me a chance. 'Cause you're long overdue for love. I can tell you've seen some stormy weather. More than once a man has let you down. I'm the kind of guy who likes forever. But you can't count on having me around. You're long overdue for some loving. You need someone to hold you all night long. If you want romance, honey, just give me a chance. 'Cause you're long overdue for love. You might think that you don't have a problem. And you might think I'm coming on too strong. But this night won't happen all that often. You might be better off to take me home. You're long overdue for some loving. I need someone to hold me all night long. Honey, I need romance. Won't you give me a chance? 'Cause I'm long overdue for love. If you want romance, honey, just give me a chance. 'Cause you're long overdue for love.
You know who it is? My favorite station. I love you guys.
Turn your radios up.
Joco Community Radio.
I've been told. Lucifer's heart is mighty cold. If I die before I wake, tell my mama that I was late. It's gonna be a long road to get back home, yeah. Long road to get back home, I'm on that long road to get back home. But it's gonna be a long road to get back home, Tell me true. If you get there before I do, you be standing by those gates. Gotta let me in case I'm late. Well, it's gonna be a long road to get back home, yeah. Long road to get back home, on that long road to get back home. Well, it's gonna be a long road to get back home. Oh, bring home. Sitting in the dark side of this bar, regretting what tomorrow's gonna bring. Cause loving you wasn't in the cards, and forgetting you is the hardest thing. Close my eyes, I'm in love with those. 'Cause you're not here, but you're on my mind. Since you left for the California coast, I guess chasing your dreams is better than you and I. So I run to the next line, follow your memory and everything is made of. Chasing you was the best part. Maybe I'll find the same kind of love. Anything like us, I'm in love. Girl,
for every woman that I pass. It does no good when I'm missing you. It's a great big hole in my hourglass. Yeah, 'cause when the sand was gone, honey, you were too. So I'll run to the next bar, follow your memory, and everything's made up. Chasing you was the best part. Maybe I'll find the same kind of love. It's anything like us, I'll be lucky enough. And someday I'll see you again on that great big Hollywood screen. And I'll have to go back everywhere we've been, relive everything. So I'll run to the next bar, follow your memory, and everything's made up. Chasing you was the best part. Maybe I'll find the same kind of love. It's anything like us, I'll be lucky enough. Maybe I'll find the same kind of love. If it's anything like us, I'll be lucky enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.